Hey, and welcome back to another exciting week of NFL. Another week here at No Huddle Fantasy Sports where we're going to be breaking down NFL DFS. In fact, it's week 13 already here. NFL week 13 DFS Slate Playbook is the video you are about to watch. We're going to break down all the main plays, all the core plays, all the guys that I think you should be including in your lineups for this upcoming Sunday's main slate. Whether you play on DraftKings or FanDuel, I've got you covered in this video with all of the players that you need to fit into winning lineups. So sit back, relax, and let's talk some NFL Week 13 DFS. Yo, hey guys, what's up and welcome back here to the channel. Welcome back to No Huddle Fantasy Sports. As always, I thank you guys so much for finding your way here, clicking on this video, and joining me as we're going to talk NFL Week 13 DFS for this upcoming Sunday's main slate. And similar to previous weeks, we're going to do it by breaking down all of the main plays, all of the core plays, the players that I'm considering playing in my lineups through Daily Fantasy Nerd, their optimizer here. These videos are quicker, they're shorter, but they still get you all the information you need to build winning lineups. So hopefully you guys are here for the right reasons. Hopefully you follow me in the past. If you haven't, please make sure you are subscribed to this channel. Make sure you like these videos, all that good stuff. I have been publishing, and they're doing really well, some short videos. It's called a YouTube short. Breaking down actually the optimizer working. So I've taken the plays that I've given out in these videos. For example, last week, maybe it was Dak Prescott and the Dallas Cowboys. I've locked them in. I've put out and published a video. It's only 15 seconds long here on YouTube where we actually run an optimizer and you guys can see which players are being included in the optimizer for some of the plays that we're locking in. So make sure you subscribe to the channel. It's the only way you'll be able to see those short videos. It is really helpful. It's really beneficial. We're going to run through the plays here again on this channel in this video for Daily Fantasy Nerd. Down in the description is the actual link to Daily Fantasy Nerd. I highly recommend it. Helps me build winning lineups nearly every single week, and I couldn't do it without them. It's an affiliate link. It does help me out, but you do get a free trial, so go ahead and check that out. But have some notes in front of me, so let's not waste any more time. Let's jump into the optimizer here. Let's talk about the plays for this week. And you can see here right off the bat, there are several games of interest with high totals. In fact, there are 4 of them I want to point out very quickly here. And that is the Los Angeles Chargers traveling to Cincinnati, sitting at 49.5, Tampa Bay at Atlanta at 50.5, Jacksonville at the Rams at 48, and Washington at Las Vegas at 49.5. Now you have to be careful though, because that Tampa Bay and Jacksonville game you can see here have incredibly big spreads. So it doesn't necessarily mean good things even with a high total. You want to be careful. But the two that were outside of that, which includes the Cincinnati game and the Las Vegas game, both have really close spreads. Cincinnati is a 3-point favorite at home, and the Las Vegas Raiders are 1.5-point favorites at home. Both of those games sitting at 49.5. Really juicy over-unders. I believe they've moved up even throughout the week. So something to consider there as we break down this slate. Always want to consider Vegas. There are other games you want to maybe stay away from. 39.5, this New York Giants at Miami game. Also looking like a little bit of weather concern from a rain or snow perspective. So again, make sure it wouldn't be snow. It's Miami, of course. Some rain coming into the forecast here. But in general, just to keep you guys aware, make sure you're paying attention to these Vegas totals. We won't spend any more time in this video on it, but it is very important. It does help you kind of sort through the weeds and find the plays that actually have a chance and are in good games where scoring is expected. But as always, we're going to start with the quarterback position here. We're going to start with the projected highest scoring quarterbacks to give you the top 5. This is sorted for FanDuel this week. I will alternate between DraftKings and FanDuel each and every other week. Sorry, lost my words there for a second. And that'll enable, if you guys play on FanDuel, if you play on DraftKings, you can kind of get a little bit out of these videos either way. But nonetheless, a lot of these plays are universal. There are some values, of course, that open up on one particular site versus the other. But in general, the reasoning, the notes, the stuff that I've done ahead of time is regardless of the actual slate or the actual platform you're playing on. So these players still stand out to me. Nonetheless, to give you the perspective of the guys that are projected to score the most amount of raw fantasy points this week, according to Daily Fantasy Nerd, you're looking at Lamar Jackson, Tom Brady, Kyler Murray, Matt Stafford, and Jalen Hurts. In terms of value, Lamar Jackson still number 1 on this slate, playing on the road in Pittsburgh. We saw basically Cincinnati dismantle Pittsburgh last week, and he isn't a guy I'm necessarily interested in this week. He's very expensive. He threw 4 picks versus Cleveland at home. So a little bit of issues there, in my opinion, on Baltimore's side. But nonetheless, Pittsburgh missing a lot of key defensive players. I believe TJ Watt has COVID. He's going to be out for the game. Cam Hayward's sick. Joe Hayden's out. Just Pittsburgh looks a mess right now, especially on defense. Nonetheless, Lamar Jackson, Tom Brady, Matt Stafford, Kyler Murray, and Jalen Hurts, very familiar names. Same guys that were projected to score the most amount of raw points are also the guys projected to score, or projected to be the most value on this slate. But in terms of guys that I am interested in, and I will break down the first couple here in particular, that's Tom Brady and Jalen Hurts, and then I'll just quickly run through the other two. But Tom Brady stands out to me this week. We played him last week, didn't have a great game last week. You can see here the volume wasn't there where it typically is most of the season. The last 3 weeks have been a little bit up and down for him. But nonetheless, I still like the spot this week. A lot of things are in Tom Brady's favor here. Obviously, he's a little pricey at $8,100, and he doesn't give you the value that, quarterbacks that run the ball give you, or at least that floor. But Tom Brady's been obviously Tom Brady this year. He's been absolutely excellent, and they have heavy pass volume. That's why I like him even as a non-mobile quarterback. In fact, they're number 1 in the NFL this year, throwing the ball 66% of the time. That's an astronomically high number for a team that's so good and has such a good offensive line. You're surprised to see it that high. The show goes through Tom Brady, and that's why we like him. Heavy pass volume is something you want in fantasy, right? You want volume, you want opportunity. Brady gives you that nearly every single week. Other things that stand out for him, he's at a huge advantage in terms of pass blocking. It's number 1 on the slate. Should have no issues in terms of pressure. And then the matchup here versus Atlanta is very juicy. You can see the numbers here given out by Daily Fantasy Nerd. 30.5 is the amount of projected points for Tampa Bay alone this week. So that's an incredible number. It's number 1 on the slate. On the road is a good thing for a quarterback. Tom Brady did very well versus Atlanta earlier in the season, scoring almost 30 points. He also did well last year, scoring over 30 points. He's getting them again on the road this week. And Atlanta's defense, not very good. 32nd overall in terms of pass rush. That's why Tom Brady is standing out with basically no inherent pressure this week against him in that offensive line. But they're also 26th in coverage and 29th in pass DVOA. So overall, just a really good spot on paper for Tom Brady. I really like him this week. I think he can pay off, finally put up a good week. It's been a few, and I think we can come back to him this week. I do also like Jalen Hurts here, $8,000 on FanDuel, but he stands out in a juicy matchup. That's kind of what we're going at this week versus the New York Jets. 26 is the implied team total for Philadelphia this week. They are pretty good favorites here at 6.5. Nonetheless, it's the matchup. He's on the road here. He gives you a lot of value on the ground, including setting a nice floor for himself, also giving you that incredible ceiling with the potential to score rushing touchdowns. Overall, so Jalen Hurts gives you less of a pass volume. We know this, right? He throws the ball, last week was 31 times, and that was the most in, I think, the last 5 weeks. Yeah, you can see here, 31 pass attempts is unusual, but it's not about the passing attempts. It's about everything else. It's about the upside and the floor that he gives you with his legs. He's averaging 13 rushing attempts per game over his last 3 games, including 66 rushing yards per game. So he's giving you nearly 7 fantasy points per game as a floor just from his rushing ability. That's not counting if he puts the ball in the end zone through the air, or 2 weeks ago against New Orleans where he scored 3 rushing touchdowns. Altogether, still a great pass blocking advantage, so shouldn't see much pressure. And the Jets, not a very good team. They have an okay middle-of-the-road pass rush, sitting at 15th overall in football right now, but they're 30th in coverage and 31st in pass DVOA. So those two guys, Tom Brady and Jalen Hurts, are by far, at this point in time, my favorite quarterbacks on the slate, guys that I will be including in my lineups. But other guys I am considering, I'll start here with Derek Carr. In general, I'll fly through this very quickly. He's had a pretty good season, all things considered. Messy season, obviously, for Las Vegas. Losing coaches, losing players, some significant losses overall for that team. But Derek Carr still holds that team together. He's still having a really good season, honestly, all things considered. He's coming off a big game, right? 21 points only, but he threw the ball nearly 40 times, went into overtime, 373 passing yards. More than likely, days like that, you'll throw more than 1 touchdown, but he only had 1 touchdown. He's only had multiple touchdowns a few times this year, but hopefully we're going to come back to that this week. The idea here is Washington is just horrendous against the pass. We've seen them get destroyed all year long. Las Vegas projected a healthy 26 points. I do like Derek Carr. And then Kirk Cousins, I listed him here for one real reason, and that's because Alexander Mattison is going to be one of the highest owned running backs on this slate. At least I believe so, with Dalvin Cook being out. That means Kirk Cousins is a great pivot off of that high ownership. Who knows? Without Dalvin Cook, they could throw the ball a little bit more here. They're on the road versus a really bad Detroit team. It's a good matchup for basically any fantasy player on Minnesota. But nonetheless, Kirk Cousins stands out to me as a great pivot off of high ownership for Alexander Mattison. Let's move over to the running back position here. I want to start, well, obviously with the projected raw points here. And you're starting out with the obvious, and that's Jonathan Taylor, who's just been an absolute monster so far. Basically the middle part of the season and just altogether this season. He's very expensive at 10.5, but outside of him, you're talking raw points here from Daily Fantasy Nerd. It's Jonathan Taylor, Joe Mixon, Austin Eckler, Alexander Mattison, and then Lenny Fournette. In terms of value, one guy stands out on FanDuel very much, and that's Antonio Gibson. A great value this week at 6,200, but it's followed up by Leonard Fournette, James Conner, Jonathan Taylor, and Joe Mixon. So those guys stand out, obviously, for the reasons given there. But the guys that I want to mention to you, and again, I will stick to a couple here. We'll start to pick up the pace, but Joe Mixon is my number one running back on this particular slate. A lot of things stand out. First of all, absolutely destroyed Pittsburgh last week with a ridiculous amount. What do you have here? 32 touches overall, 32 opportunities, 32 touches, 165 yards. He's had multiple 100-plus rushing yard games in a row now, 2 of them in a row, and he's had 4 really solid games just generally with 23-plus fantasy points in every game since week 8. So Joe Mixon is starting to turn into Joe Mixon we have come to expect. Now, he did not play a lot earlier in this season, and by a lot I mean a workhorse type of workload that we seem to expect out of a player like Joe Mixon. But the last 2 weeks are what's important to look at here. He played 72% of the snaps in week 12, and he played identically 72% of the snaps in week 11. Coincidentally, both of those came after their week 10 bye. Joe Mixon was banged up a little bit earlier in this part of the season. You can see 16 attempts, 10 attempts, 18, 12, 14, 13. We don't want that, right? We want what we saw over the last couple of weeks, and I really think he's healthy now, and that's why, coincidentally, after the bye, you're seeing him get a lot more opportunities. So that's what we want to go with here. But in general, absolutely excellent last few weeks. I talked about it already. He had 32 touches, basically 32 opportunities and touches in week 12 versus Pittsburgh. Absolutely incredible numbers there. We want 25 plus. Certainly we'll take 30 plus. He's averaged 22 opportunities overall over his last 3 games. He's had 14 red zone rushing attempts over his last 3 games. All excellent numbers there. And they have a great run blocking advantage here, according to Pro Football Focus, sitting at 46%. Now, in terms of the matchup, very juicy matchup here versus the Los Angeles Chargers. The only team right now that might be worse against the run than the Pittsburgh Steelers, who he's coming off a great game against, could be the LA Chargers. They're allowing 2.1 yards before contact. I'm not talking about per rush. I'm talking about before contact. That's an incredibly bad number. I think it's number 2 overall in the NFL, second worst in the NFL. So again, essentially running backs are going 2 yards before they're even touched by a defender, and we want to take advantage of that here with Joe Mixon. Beyond that, 24th in terms of rush defense, according to Pro Football Focus, and then dead last, 32nd in DVOA. So an excellent matchup outside of everything I discussed earlier for Joe Mixon here. He's definitely a guy I'm considering heavily owning in my lineups this weekend. Now, I did talk obviously about some of these guys throughout. Jonathan Taylor, it's hard not to play him right now. Darrell Henderson in a great spot at home versus Jacksonville. Huge spread in favor of running back. 30 implied total for them. Alexander Mattison is not a value because we kind of expected Dalvin Cook to go down. FanDuel was able to adjust $8,700 here. So very expensive price tag. Nonetheless, great spot, great opportunity. Detroit, one of the worst defenses. But the other guy I want to spend a little bit of time on is Antonio Gibson here, especially on FanDuel, where I mentioned he is one of the best values on the slate. He's only $6,200. I don't know why he's mispriced, but they ran the heck out of him last week versus Seattle. If you guys watched that game, he seemingly was busting runs left and right? But he had 36 attempts, or 36 touches, I should say, in Week 12 versus Seattle. That included 6 red zone rushing attempts. More importantly, over his last 3 games, he's had no less than 6 red zone rushing attempts. That's at $6,200. That's something you want to eat up on FanDuel. Overall, though, outside of that, great matchup this week versus Las Vegas. Las Vegas, good defense. I wouldn't say they're one of the better defenses in the NFL. They have a really good pass rush. They have a pretty good secondary. You want to run the ball against Las Vegas. In terms of their numbers, they're 19th overall in rush defense, according to Pro Football Focus, and 17th in DVOA. So again, this is a value play. He stands out to me as one of the best plays at the running back position this week on FanDuel. Now, DraftKings pricing could be different, likely is different, and this could be different, right? It could be a different decision here. Other guys considering Saquon Barkley. We wanted him to bust out last week, didn't quite get there. Maybe this is the week he starts to play more snaps, increasing. He seemingly increases every week. We'll see what happens. Jamal Williams. Depending on his ownership, I'm interested. If it's low, I'm definitely interested in. If it's high, I'm not so interested in. We'll just see how that plays out. But obviously, in place of Swift, who has been rolled out for this game and likely for several weeks here, Minnesota, another team basically both Detroit and Minnesota are weak against the run, and both have backup running backs in. So go ahead, play that if that entices you. I will spend a second here on Miles Sanders. Now, if you're interested in playing Jalen Hurts, which you should be because I discussed him, great. But I will be in my non-Jalen Hurts lineups considering Miles Sanders, and this is not for the faint of heart because he has not played a lot. He's been up and down, really just down all season long. They don't use him enough. He has low snap counts. All those things, yes, are in consideration here. He's more expensive than Antonio Gibson. He's $6,600 here on FanDuel, but it's a great matchup. Earlier this season, he played 75 to 85% of the snaps. That's what we want out of Miles Sanders. I think he's a great talent. I think he's in a great spot this week versus the Jets on the road. I mean, if they give him the ball, it's an excellent matchup, and that's what I want to take advantage of here at a very, very low ownership. Basically, it's the highest run blocking, according to Pro Football Focus, the highest run blocking advantage on the entire slate, meaning they should just manhandle this New York Jets defensive line and defense up front from a rushing perspective. Now, will Miles Sanders benefit from that? We'll see. I'm going to take a shot on him for sure. But overall, New York Jets, 32nd in terms of rush defense, 30th overall in DVOA. Moving over to the wide receiver position here, a lot of guys obviously in play. All the guys I mentioned in terms of quarterbacks, you want to pair them with wide receivers, with tight ends. That's something that doesn't need to be said, but nonetheless, make sure you do. But guys, I'll quickly go through here. Justin Jefferson, Chris Godwin, Keenan Allen, Adam Thielen, Terry McLaurin, Jalen Waddle, Michael Pittman, Hunter Renfrow, Devonta Smith, DK Metcalf, and T. Higgins, all for various reasons. I love the matchup for Justin Jefferson this week. I talked about Kirk Cousins and how it could be, you could pivot off of Madison if he's highly owned and go with Justin Jefferson. He's obviously an incredible talent. You saw him in week 11 here, 8 for 10, 8 catches on 10 targets, 32 total points, 2 touchdowns, 169 yards. Has multiple games this season where he just has blown up in terms of yardage. Hopefully gets more red zone attempts, things like that, or red zone targets. But nonetheless, my favorite matchup this week, it's Pro Football Focus is one of their best matchups, wide receiver quarterback matchups on the week. So Justin Jefferson does stand out this week. Good total at 26.5. Maybe they'll throw more, as I mentioned, with Dalvin Cook out, and Justin Jefferson would certainly benefit from that. I do like Chris Godwin more than I like Mike Evans this week. Nonetheless, both in play with Tom Brady. Keenan Allen's just so consistently good with targets. You're talking 5 straight weeks with 10-plus targets, double-digit targets. It's hard to ignore that. Adam Thielen, same reason I mentioned with Justin Jefferson. Not as good of a matchup in terms of what's projected from Pro Football Focus, but nonetheless, still a great play in my opinion. Terry McLaurin's an elite receiver with a bad team, but I like playing him every week. It's just what I do. If you want to come back against that Las Vegas stack, that's why I have him listed here. If you're going to stack Derek Carr, you got to come back with somebody. So I'm coming back with Antonio Gibson and or Terry McLaurin. Jalen Waddle's having a great season. Just watch out for that weather. Michael Pittman is very underrated in my opinion. Didn't have a very good game against Houston earlier in the season, but has certainly come on over the last few weeks. Had 10 targets in Week 12 versus a very good Tampa Bay team. I do like Michael Pittman to pivot off of Jonathan Taylor. But the other guy I want to spend a second on here is Hunter Renfrow. He's my favorite play with the Las Vegas stack. I mean, there's not much of a stack left, right? Darren Waller's out. Henry Ruggs isn't playing for probably ever again. So you got like Hunter Renfrow, who's just probably going to get a huge amount of volume. He's been extremely consistent this season. He doesn't let you down, very rarely lets you down. I do like Hunter Renfrow. Obviously, pair Smith with Jalen Hurts. That's my favorite pairing. I don't think you have to go much more than that. Maybe Dallas Goedert if you want to. And then DK Metcalf. I'm just simply going to play him because I don't think anybody will play him this week. He has been letting people down really, really consistently over the last few weeks with obviously Russ back in the lineup. It just has not been good. But hey, if you can get DK Metcalf at basically no ownership, I'll give it a shot here. And then T. Higgins. I like him more than Jamar Chase this week. I think Jamar Chase is going to have a rough matchup in terms of that secondary for the Chargers, and T. Higgins could go under-owned here and could get the most amount of targets on this team and put together a solid game. So those are the wide receivers I like this week. And then in terms of tight ends, we're talking very few guys, right? You could play anyone at tight end, but George Kittle, Mark Andrews, Rob Gronkowski, Mike Gesicki, and Dallas Goedert are the guys that stand out for me this week. I like George Kittle because he's George Kittle. Mark Andrews is likely my favorite play this week, and simply because whether it's Devin Bush or anyone else for the linebacking crew for the Steelers, they can't stop the run, and they can't guard a soul. So I think Mark Andrews is going to get a healthy amount of targets visiting Pittsburgh this week. Gronkowski, great with Tom Brady. Mike Gesicki has just been really a guy I've picked, I wouldn't say picked on, a guy that I've picked here and there throughout the season, with Tua, without Tua. He's been up and down. Yeah, didn't have a great week versus Carolina, but I do like him at $6,000 versus the Giants this week. And then finally, I mentioned him briefly, Dallas Goedert really hasn't turned into the player that we thought he would be. He got a good deal, right? He just re-signed up with Philadelphia, and they traded away Zach Ertz. Everyone thought he would get a ridiculous passing volume increase, and he did. In fact, it's just the fact that they don't throw the ball a lot. So it's hard to pair Dallas Goedert and Smith with Jalen Hurts and see the ball thrown for 25 times. So, but nonetheless, at some point, this guy likely is going to blow up. He's a very talented tight end. And so that really wraps it up in terms of the plays for this week. Hopefully these videos help you guys. Obviously, we've put in time, we've put in the homework here, and we've broken down the best plays for this upcoming Sunday. If you guys haven't done so already, please make sure you are subscribed to the channel. If you're subscribed to the channel, you'll check out, we'll put out some shorts over the next couple days. I'll try to break down every quarterback, right? So the guys I mentioned, and that includes Tom Brady and Jalen Hurts, and if I end up with Kirk Cousins or I end up with Derek Carr, I'll make sure to put together some short videos detailing the breakdown and 15-second videos and the optimizers breakdown and actual build of a lineup with those players and their stacks. So again, hopefully these videos are helpful for you guys. Please leave some comments down below if I've missed anything. You guys are the best. Good luck this weekend, and I will catch you in the next video.